Today is a day like any other day. At least that's how it seemed for most people living through the year 1945. But for the world at large, this was an important date, a date that would go down in history. Today we will look back on the day that World War II officially ended. As the sun rose over the deck of the USS Missouri, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange, few aboard realized they were about to witness something monumental. It was the morning of September 2nd, 1945, and for those gathered on the battleship, it promised to be just another patrol of the Pacific. For Captain William Galbraith, though, this day was far from ordinary. He had orders to deliver ones that would bring an end to a global conflict that had taken millions of lives and irrevocably altered the course of human history. But what events led up to this pivotal moment? Let us rewind a little over 3 years to a time when the world was on the brink of chaos. The year was 1941, and on a fateful day in December, the Japanese had launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. This unprovoked assault thrust the United States into the maelstrom of World War II. The attack had been swift and devastating, leaving a scar that ran deep into American psyche. The immediate aftermath, 2,400 Americans lay dead, 1,178 wounded. Battleships and other military installations had been crippled. The shockwaves reverberated not only across the Pacific, but also through the annals of history. It was a day that would live on in infamy. For the next 4 years, the world became a battleground. Continents were divided, alliances were forged, and millions of lives hung in the balance. Through it all, the Allies stood firm, determined to bring an end to the war. Then came the turning point. In 1945, 2 cities in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, became the targets of the first and only atomic bombs used in warfare. The devastation was unprecedented, leaving thousands dead and entire cities leveled. These events sent shockwaves around the world, forcing all parties to reconsider their positions. The unimaginable power displayed by these weapons served as a grim foreshadowing of what the future might hold if the war continued. It was a stark reminder that the path ahead was fraught with peril and demanded a critical reassessment of strategy. As the smoke cleared and the world grappled with the implications of these new realities, the stage was set for the events that would unfold on the deck of the USS Missouri. Now let's get back to the story. On August, the official document known as the Japanese Instrument of Surrender was signed aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, thereby formally ending the hostilities of World War II. Let's take a closer look at the events leading up to the historic event. Following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the situation in Japan reached a critical point. With the Soviet Union declaring war on Japan and advancing through Manchuria, the writing was on the wall for the Japanese leadership. Realizing the dire straits they found themselves in, the Japanese government began to seriously consider the terms for surrender. On August, the Potsdam Declaration, issued by the United States, the United Kingdom, and China, provided a framework for surrender. However, the Japanese government was initially non-committal about accepting these terms. They desired more specific details, especially regarding the role of Emperor Hirohito in a post-war Japan amidst these tense negotiations. A pivotal decision was made to invite Allied representatives to Japan to discuss the terms of surrender in person. The location chosen for these crucial talks was aboard the USS Missouri, a symbol of America's industrial might and a fitting venue for such a historic event. The battleship had played a significant role during the war, and its presence in Tokyo Bay carried both symbolic and strategic weight. The atmosphere aboard the ship was one of cautious optimism, as the key players involved in bringing World War II to an end prepared to meet. The discussions were intense, marked by moments of both progress and deadlock. The Allies, represented by the United States, the United Kingdom, and China, stood firm on the principles outlined in the Potsdam Declaration, demanding unconditional surrender from Japan. On the other side of the table sat the Japanese delegation led by Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo, who were tasked with the delicate negotiation of their country's fate. Among the most contentious issues was the status of Emperor Hirohito. The Japanese delegation argued for his retention as a symbol of national unity and continuity, while the Allies insisted on demilitarization and democratization as essential conditions for peace. As the days of discussion dragged on, the weight of history pressed down on those gathered in the ship. Each decision they made would have profound implications, not only for the immediate future of Japan, but also for the shape of the post-war world. Finally, after intense negotiations, and under the watchful eyes of the world, the Japanese delegation signed the instrument of surrender on board the USS Missouri. It was a moment pregnant with significance, a culmination of years of bloodshed and sacrifice. The formal end of hostilities in World War II was upon them. As the ink dried on the surrender documents, a collective sigh of relief swept across the assembled dignitaries and soldiers alike. The long and brutal conflict that had cast a long shadow over the world was finally coming to an end. The road to peace had been a treacherous one, lined with countless hardships and sacrifices. But this moment of triumph made it all worthwhile. The news of the Japanese surrender spread like wildfire around the globe, electrifying people from all corners of the world. In cities and towns, celebrations erupted, a spontaneous outpouring of joy and relief. People danced in the streets, fireworks lit up the night sky, and the sounds of jubilation echoed across continents. It was a shared moment of euphoria, a testament to the resilience and unity of the human spirit in the face of adversity. In the United States, President Harry S. Truman addressed the nation. Sharing the momentous news of Japan's surrender and the impending end of World War II, his words rang with emotion and gratitude. "It is my privilege tonight to tell my countrymen that the fighting in World War II has ended," he declared. "It is a victory for the ages." The American people listened intently, their hearts filled with a mixture of elation and disbelief. For many, it marked the moment when the heavy burden of war, which had been weighing on their shoulders for so long, finally began to lift. The news also reached the distant battlefields where American soldiers were stationed. Among them was Private First Class John Meadows, who was serving in the Pacific when the announcement came. Overwhelmed with emotion, he shared the news with his comrades, and together they celebrated the end of the war. "We were all crying and hugging each other," he recalled. "I couldn't believe it. I thought I'd never get to see my folks again." For young John, as for countless others, the war had been a distant and terrifying reality. Now, with its end on the horizon, he felt a surge of hope and anticipation for the day when he could finally return home. And then, there were those who had been eagerly awaiting the news of victory. Take, for instance, Helen Viola, a young woman working as a nurse in a military hospital. She had spent years tending to the wounds of soldiers, witnessing firsthand the toll the war had taken on both their bodies and spirits. As she heard the news of Japan's surrender, tears streamed down her face, a mixture of relief, joy, and profound sadness for those who had not made it home. In that moment, she knew that her life, like that of so many others, would never be the same again. As the world reeled from the impact of the news, one couldn't help but marvel at the magnitude of the event. After years of conflict, death, and destruction, the guns had finally fallen silent. The echoes of war would continue to reverberate through history. But the moment had come to start the arduous journey towards healing and rebuilding. And it was a journey that began on that very day on the deck of the USS Missouri. The news of Japan's surrender sent shock waves across the globe, reaching even the remote jungles of Burma. There, amidst the dense foliage and dense undergrowth, Private Kenneth Newman and his fellow soldiers of the Burma Star veterans listened intently to the wireless set crackling with the news. Overwhelmed with a mix of emotions, they realized the war was finally over. They had survived the brutal Burma campaign, enduring hunger, disease, and relentless attacks. Now, as they stood in the heart of the jungle, they raised a cheer, their voices echoing through the trees in celebration of their survival and the end of their ordeal. Private Newman clutched the wireless set, his hands shaking. "I couldn't believe it," he recounted later. "It was like a dream." We all stood there in stunned silence for a moment, and then someone shouted, "The Japanese have surrendered." We all went wild with joy. Thousands of miles away in London, news of the Japanese surrender was received with equal elation. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, was informed of the development and wasted no time in sharing the good news with his cabinet. As the full weight of the moment sank in, a broad smile spread across Churchill's face. He knew that the end of World War II was not just a victory for Britain, but for all of humanity. In a remarkable display of unity and resilience, the British people had endured years of hardship and sacrifice. standing firm against the darkness that had threatened to engulf the world. Now, as they celebrated the hard-won victory, carried with them the deep scars of their experiences, a constant reminder of the fragility of peace. As the world reveled in the euphoria of victory, one couldn't help but reflect on the profound impact of the day. It was a day that had dawned like any other, but quickly evolved into a pivotal moment in human history. The signing of the Japanese instrument of surrender on the deck of the USS Missouri marked the official end of World War II, bringing to a close a global conflict that had engulfed the world for over 6 years. It was a day when the weary soldiers, the grieving families, and the hopeful dreamers all held their breath as the fate of the world hung in the balance. But now, as the news of peace spread like wildfire, the world erupted in joy. Giving thanks for the end of the war and the promise of a new dawn,